Hey guys, and welcome back to the briefing room. So, as you guys probably have seen from my tweets and my Facebook stuff, we're going to be talking about ROBOTECH issue number 7 by Titan Comics, which came out on Wednesday. Unfortunately, there's a holiday on Wednesday, and being a married person, that was out of the picture. And the next day is a special day for my spouse. So it's been tough for me to get to this, so that's why it's a little bit behind. But anyway, the first page of the first page of the comic picks up right where issue 6 left off, with Chiron being like, "I'll get my vengeance!" And of course, on the next page, Britai's like, yeah, no. You directly disobeyed me. I told you absolutely no gravity mines. You used gravity mines anyway. And, yeah, that's not happening. So, there is then the second page, or that was the second page. Britai's a lot more condescending than he was in the show. He's a lot more condescending, and Chiron's a lot more of like a child. He's much more like, but why? I want to do this. And then Britai walks off and is like, yeah, no, it's not happening. And Chiron's like, it's happening anyway. But Britai admits that he was very impressed with the humans, or the Micronians, as we know Zentradi called them, based on that battle at the Mars base. And as I said before, Chiron's like, yeah, I don't care what you say, I'm gonna do it anyway. I already made this vow, I can't break it. So he decides to keep his resolve and go after the SDF-1 anyway, in order to exact his revenge. The SDF-1 is, in the comic it says it's 1 astro unit away from Mars base now. And I looked it up, and 1 astro unit is about 150 million kilometers, or 93 million miles. So that's how far away they are from Mars at this point. And Lang informs Captain Hayes that, hey, there is a space-time schism or rift that has been opened because of the disappearance of the spacefold generator. And we get a very early reference to shadow technology. Now, shadow technology wasn't referenced until the second to last episode. So episode 84, it was 83 or 84, I'm pretty sure it was 84, was the first time we got any reference to shadow technology. So it's 84, 85, and then the Shadow Chronicles. That's the only reference to, shadow technology we got in the show. So very minimal. And they're already bringing it up 7 issues in. And this is the equivalent of episode 8. This is the events here are about the events of episode 8 in the show. So, extraordinarily early reference to shadow technology, although they call it shadow warfare. But apparently, the scientists at Mars Base were trying to utilize this technology, utilize robotechnology with this technology of opening up a space-time rift so that they could temporarily cloak fighters and so forth, and then decloak them at the location of the enemies. And there's no way to detect that. So the enemies would be completely blind and blindsided by attacks with this technology. And it's a strange thing. I'm going to admit, strange thing. And then Lisa, of course, asks about that strange apparition of her former fiance, Carl, and whether or not that had anything to do with this new technology, which is very curious because, as I pointed out, RoboSkullcast, they kind of had this theory. It was half joking, half like, actually playing around because they enjoy making up these headcanon stories, which are usually entertaining and, as we find out later, possibly very accurate. But their theory was, that it was what was it? It was actually a ghost or a hologram or something. I could believe a hologram because it stops often. When she's not following it, when she stops and looks at something else, it stops and waits for her, and then it points her. So it's like it was almost like programmed to reach a certain spot and wait till that person reached that spot before moving on. It didn't seem like it was very humanesque. But that being said, I kind of thought it was more human than technology. I've kind of gone back on that. But either way, it's very interesting. It's if it is this technology, that means that Carl is still alive, just in another, just trying to communicate from another time or another dimension, however they pursue that. And that's very interesting to me, to see where they're going to go with it. But anyway, they they go to that, and let's see. Another big thing that I haven't discussed is that interesting. Hold on. Where is it? Oh, that's why it's on there. There we go. Sorry. Lang informs her that it's actually, the rift is actually getting bigger. This space-time schism is actually increasing in size, which, again, would be interesting to see if they end up playing back into that down the line. Because, really, in the show, after they reach Earth, they're really not doing anything until they're really not doing anything after they reach Earth. They kind of go around Earth trying to get the people in the SDF-1 back on Earth, and then they kind of just orbit Earth the rest of the show. They never really venture out again. So it's going to be interesting if in this series they do decide to venture out again. and they do decide to what's the word I'm looking for? Pursue this schism, or whether it's going to come into play in what we know as the Robotech Master Saga or the New Generation Saga, or even if it plays into what we know as the Shadow Chronicles. That's going to be interesting if the comics reach the point that the animation is at, where it's kind of like, well, we got to make up something now. That's going to be something really fun. But hold on just a second. All right. Sorry about that. So Rick is super surprised by the holographic sky. You'd think that he would have known about it, considering he's part of the military, and they know everything. It is a military vessel. You'd think that he'd know about it. He doesn't. He's very shocked about it. This kind of plays into the books too. Kind of the show. It's kind of just a brief line, like, "Oh, there's a sky." That's what it's like in the show. It's pretty minimal. It goes a little bit more in depth into that in the books. In this, it in the books, you're kind of imagining it. Here you actually see his expression. He's dumbfounded that there's a sky in the ship, and he's also on top of that, he's shocked about the size of Min-May's birthday party. He thought it was just going to be like, oh yeah, a few friends, birthday cake, standard stuff. Now, she's having a street party. It's going to be a huge setup, big stage, singing, dancing, just basically a street rave. Because she's like, hey, we need to celebrate this new day-night cycle with the holographic sky. It'll get everybody's spirits up, da-da-da. And it's really a credit to her to think about that kind of thing. Because that's not really... It is kind of something she thinks about in the show, but not really. Hold on. Oh yeah, she informs Rick that she was rejected for Macross Has Talent, which I still gotta say, not a huge fan of that. I get it. You gotta stay with the times. Beauty pageants are no longer a thing that's popular. Reality shows and talent competitions are what's popular now. I get it. It's just kind of really. But it happens. So Lisa, this part's going to be fun to talk about. Probably going to spend quite a bit on this particular couple pages. But Lisa tells Roy that she knows about everything. She knows about what happened in the crash of the SDF-1. She knows about everything. She even apologizes. She's like, I'm so sorry. And Roy's like, whoa, hold up. How do you know about this? The only people on the ship that went there was me and Captain Global. And she shows him the holographic message where Global's like, all right, Lisa, if you're watching this, something bad's happened to me. All right, gotta keep this on the DL, but there's some things you need to know about the fate of the ship and the crew. And, and then she stops the message. She's like, but first, before we can talk about any of that, and Rick walks through the door. And she awards Rick the Titanium Medal of Valor, which I love that they kept this in. It's the only medal we actually know the name of in the Robotech Defense Force. and I love that they kept it. It's also a medal in Robotech Battlecry, which I need to finish my Let's Play on, but that's a whole nother story altogether. Rick also receives his wingmen, Max Sterling and Ben Dixon. Not sure about Max's hair in this. It's more suitable for the military than his previous haircut would have been. But let's face it, this is Robotech. Roy's hair is not regulation in real life. Rick's hair isn't regulation. But yes, he doesn't have the shoulder length hair anymore. It's cut like mine, and then it's longer in the front. Still blue. He still has the blue aviators with it, which is great. I love that. But anyway, that's all said and done. But let me show you Max and Ben. I forgot to show you that. All right. And there it is. Max and Ben. See what I mean with his hair? Not sure how I feel about it. Ben's hair is okay. It's about what it was in the show. Not a whole lot of difference there. It happens. Oops, wrong one. So anyway, next page. They are dismissed. She's like, I got to talk to Commander Fokker. You guys leave. And so they're like, okay, yeah, see ya. Whatever. And so they all leave. And Roy asks Lisa, he's like, what was that? Why? And she basically calls it a paradox test case. Because she knows Roy's been trying to keep him out of the military. She knows he's been like, hey, I didn't invite you to this island. If you don't have an invitation, get out. If you, oh, your eyesight's messed up. You can't fly. Go. He's constantly been trying to find an excuse for Rick not to be joining. And I addressed this in one of my previous discussions. It almost feels like it almost felt as if they weren't as close as they were in the show. But this just shows that actually Roy does care a lot about Rick. It is not just a one-way street in the relationship, There was a couple moments that were like small where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe he doesn't absolutely hate him. But the fact that she addresses this and it's like, look, I know you don't want him in the military, but here's why he has to be, and here's why this has to happen, which we'll get into in a minute. But Roy absolutely cares about Rick, as we're finding out. He knows of the fates of everybody, apparently. That's something that's going to be discussed. He knows about a lot of things that are to come, and he's trying to keep Rick out of it. He's trying to prevent that from happening to Rick, which, good on him. Good big brother type thing. But as she points out, this is going to happen. And it could be even worse if it happens beyond what we know. If we try to change anything, it could be worse. She learns of the fate of Rick after watching Global's recording, which that begs a whole lot of questions. Because, alright, so RoboSkullcast did this theory, and it's an interesting theory. I don't know how far this theory goes, though. Sorry, I'm kind of sliding around in my chair. I don't know how this theory goes, because their theory, and at this point, it's looking like a pretty solid theory. Out of all of their headcanon that they've made up, just for fun or whatever, right now, this is looking like, even though they did it for fun, this is looking pretty good right now. Of course, there's still a lot of story to be told. It could change. We have no idea what's going on right now. I will preface by saying that. But they discussed that perhaps with Global, like, he finds out that, if you're space folding during an explosion or whatever, it's going to mess up the space-time, which, as we're finding out, that's what space folds do, which I've also discussed in my only Science Bay video that's out there. I discuss the fact that a space fold is a wormhole, which is exactly that, a rip in space-time. But they theorize that maybe he keeps going back. He keeps trying to open up these new possibilities and try to change things so that things end up for the better. And he keeps failing, so he keeps doing it over and over again. Kind of like that episode of Star Trek, where the Next Generation, one of my favorites actually, where it's just over and over, and they start getting this feeling of deja vu, like, what's going on? I feel like all of this has happened before. But yeah, they, like I said, at first, they're like, oh yeah, it's theory. It's looking pretty good right now, like, based on what we've seen so far. That being said, I'm not sure that's it. Because in the flashback of issue number 4, when Roy and Admiral Hayes are exploring the wreckage, a lot of the corpses in the control room look like a lot of the people in the control room right now. There's a chick in a green RDF uniform, what looks like a green RDF uniform, that looks a lot like Claudia, who's in a green RDF uniform. And then there's a girl in a chair that looks like Lisa, that, Admiral Hayes looks at her and he's like, oh no. Because it looks like Lisa. Looks like his daughter. There's a corpse in what looks like an RDF captain's uniform that looks a lot like Global. So I'm thinking that that's playing a part in this. I don't know what's going on here. They could be doing like a end of the circle type deal where, spoiler for End of the Circle, which is the last novel in the Robotech timeline, in the novel's timeline. And at the end, Minmay gives birth to Zor, who then creates the SDF-1 and sends it to Earth. And the cycle begins. That's why it's called End of the Circle. It ends with the beginning of the first book, basically. So it's an interesting... It'd be interesting if something like that's going on, and it could play into that whole space-time rift that they just opened up near Pluto. It would explain exactly why, without any readings, Global's like, yeah, we're by Pluto. That's why you're not getting anything. Because he knows about it. Because of the wreckage of the SDF-1. They found out about all of this. Everything that's happening right now. To some extent, they know. Like, things have changed a little bit, because, like I said, Global was dead in that, Global was dead in the bridge, in the wreckage that they found on Earth. But he just now died a couple issues ago. So there's a big change there. So things are being changed in the timeline, for better or for worse. But it seems like there is a there's more going on than what was going on in the show, which I really enjoy. But I don't think it has to do with the show and, him trying to change things at the very last minute when Chiron blows up the SDF-1 and SDF-2 in the show, and he's just trying to change things so things play out a little different. I think that they learned too much. I think there was some sort of issue, and like I said, it could be that space-time rift that they opened up near Pluto, but there was some sort of I believe that it has to do with that flashback where they're in the ship and they're trying to figure things out. And that could be exactly why the crash looked like the SDF-1 and not like a lot of people are complaining about, like Zor's version of the SDF-1, because in the books and, for lack of a better term, the extended universe that's no longer canon, Zor's ship looked different than the SDF-1. Even in canon, Britai's like, that's Zor's ship. What did they do to it? Like, it changed significantly, but in the opening, it looks just like the SDF-1, and people are like, oh, they didn't even change it. Looks just like the SDF-1. My whole thing about that was, it's for new readers and current fans. They need to appeal to both. And if it looked different for the new viewers, they're going to be like, what happened to the ship that just crashed? Why does it look different now? Like, it would have been confusing to them. We, knowing what happens, it wouldn't be confusing to us. But now that they have this whole multiple timeline kind of thing, what's going on with my stream? That's not good. Alright, I'll just keep going, and hopefully it's not a whole lot I can do right now. Everything's looking okay on my end. But anyway, okay, so where was I? So with this whole multiple timeline thing, that could explain why it looked like the SDF-1 and not like Zor's Battle Fortress. Long story short. So people that were saying that, they can kind of shut up now. And hopefully my stream gets better. Anyway, I knew that section was going to take a long time because there was a lot to it. And guys, feel free to talk. Okay, there we go. It's back now. Guys, feel free to talk about, enter your comments. I'd love to hear what you have to think. This is a discussion after all. If you're just kind of watching, you don't want to comment, that's fine. I just don't want you to feel like I'm the only one that's talking and you have no input. I'd love to hear your input on it if you have something to say. But Chiron, as we all found out earlier, he's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it anyway. What's Britai gonna do, huh? He follows the SDF-1. He's found it, and he's like, wow, that was easy to find. When you leave a trail like that, a toddler could do this. And so, he then, after he finds it, he ponders why Britai wants it captured rather than destroyed. Because, what's the point? Why would we not destroy it? We destroy everything else. We're a warrior race. That's our prerogative. That's our whole purpose in being. Why aren't we trying to destroy the ship? So he's like, there must be some sort of power on this that I could use to overthrow my bosses, my leaders. And then Grell, his right-hand man, his first lieutenant, as you will, or first mate, whatever you want to call it, he tells him, hey, we're receiving this binary code from the SDF-1. He's like, really? They're sending us a message? But I'm starting to think that maybe there is this mole, this human on board, that even though they don't, Roy says, I realize that in this very issue, Roy says, the only person on the ship that knows what happened was me and Global. What if there's someone else on the ship that Roy doesn't know about, that knows about the events that happened on the crash site, and they're trying to manipulate things in their favor? We've seen it before in Robotech, and I'm going to throw out a name that it could be, not saying it is, but it could be, General T.R. Edwards. He's infamous in Robotech. He's in numerous non-canon things. He's really the only canon thing he's in anymore is Prelude to the Shadow Chronicles, which kind of piggybacks off non-canon or secondary canon type stuff. But he was xenophobic. He was afraid of other beings. He wanted them all wiped out. But in the end, he found an alien race that was far superior to the humans' technology. And so he kind of manipulates the leader of that alien race, the Invid, the Invid Regent, the king of the Invid. He manipulates him and kind of tricks him into and piggybacks off of him. So he gives the Regent information that the Regent uses to kind of mess things up, and they end up, and the crew of the SDF-3 ends up getting banished, and in the end, it's found out what he was doing, and they end up pursuing him and kill him and the Regent. Actually, he kills the Regent by firing on the Regent while they're all fighting, wiping out both sides. But it could be him. I'm not saying it is, just because that would be way too obvious, but it's worth thinking about because he has done it in the past. And he is a character that I've been wondering about with this comic series, whether or not they're going to address him or not. And the person that choked out Global or snapped Global's neck or whatever happened to kill Global, their sleeve looked like a commanding officer's sleeve, which T.R. Edwards at this point would be a high-ranking officer. He wouldn't be a general yet, but he would be high-ranking at this point in the story. So I'm not ruling him out. And in the books, he was at the crash site. But it was much more well-known by Roy because Roy didn't like him, and they had to work together. But anyway, that's just my crackpot theories on the subject. Feel free to let me know what you guys think about that Roboskull cast's theory, my theory about, what the flashback and whether the space-time rift has anything to do with it. Let me know everything about that. I'd love to hear from you guys. But on the next page, moving on finally, Rick, Max, and Ben are just shocked by the sheer size of Minmay's party. It's massive. It's blocks upon blocks of people. It looks like Macross City, the entire city is there, just partying it up. And she starts approaching, and Rick beckons her over and introduces her to his wingmen. And Max Max is extraordinarily smooth. He's not nearly that smooth with the ladies in the show, but in this, it's fantastic how smooth he is. He's like, Lieutenant Hunter didn't tell me that you and Aphrodite were separated at birth. And even Minmay's like, that's good. I like that. But Ben's just typical, I'm an anime character. He's like, oh, I'm Ben. I forgot my last name. And then she's like, well, you guys enjoy. I'm about to go sing. So she goes to sing, and and they're just watching in awe of her singing. And they did a good job with the concert scene with that panel. I am loving what is it? Marco Torini's doing. The art at first was shaky. I'll admit there was some problems with the first couple issues that I had with the art. He's really fine-tuned it, and I don't think Minmay's looked better in the series than she does in this particular issue. But I'm just really loving what they've been doing so far. It cuts back to the bridge, and obviously Lisa's not there right now. Claudia's in charge, and she's asking, for updates, and all of a sudden, everything shakes. She's like, what's going on? What just happened? And Vanessa, it's like, I don't know. There's no readings. There's no readings because the first shot that was fired destroyed their radio tower, their sensor array. All of that's gone. They are completely blind at the moment. And, Lisa comes on board, and Claudia's like, I have no idea what just happened. I know something happened. I can't pinpoint it because we have no readings. And they determine that it's because the sensor array and the radar tower have all been destroyed. There's nothing left. And I love the little detail. I don't have the picture in my portfolio, but I love the space pictures of the SDF-1 because you can see the bits and pieces of the sensor array all throughout the space pictures, just floating around in bits and pieces. But let's see, anything else? Oh yeah, before that, before they get hit, they get a message from the Earth, and they're like, hey, we're just letting you know this is a priority message. Your security system apparently is breached. There's an issue with your security. Now, I mentioned earlier a possible mole, and this continues to play into it. And that's, if the security system's been breached, and Chiron just got a message in a binary code from the SDF-1, that's where my theory is coming from. Is someone sending Chiron messages? Like, are they being told specific information? Now, Chiron's a very clever leader, even though he's failed twice now. He's a very clever leader. And I feel like he would know where a sensor array would be, but at the same time, he seems to be clueless about this ship. Which they kind of already knew the ship in the show because it was their master's ship. Their masters were the ones that owned the ship, and then it disappeared. So they all know about the ship. It was legendary to them. But it seems like it's a little bit more of a secret, just like some of the stuff that happens is a little bit more of a secret to the humans in this. It seems like the Zentradi are a little bit more blind in general to everything going on as well. So what if they're feeding information to Chiron about where to strike, if he needs to strike? And is that who choked out Global? Someone killed Global. We know that. We saw a part of their face, and we saw their arms, and we saw them kill Global. But we haven't seen all of them. We don't know. There is someone on the ship that is trying to destroy the ship. Not necessarily destroy, but willing enough to kill the leader of the ship, his own boss, because he was in military apparel. Someone was willing to kill their boss, their captain. What's to say that they're not the ones sending the message? Why the bridge crew clearly doesn't know about the message, so they're not the ones that sent the message. What's to say that the person that killed Global isn't willing to send a message to the Zentradi? And what's their gain? Which is kind of why I'm thinking about T.R. Edwards. T.R. Edwards did not want to collude with the enemy, but he knew that colluding with the enemy meant that there was, he could benefit from it. It was all about him. It was never about colluding with the enemy. It was about what can he do to overthrow the leaders of the Robotech Expeditionary Force so that he can climb to power and do what he wanted. And colluding with someone he hated was the best way to go about it. So that's where my theory about the mole is coming from, and that's why I'm kind of leaning towards Edwards. Again, the problem with Edwards is that would be a little too easy, because we already know that he's done it in the past in other material throughout the Robotech universe. We know that. But again, that's kind of what I'm thinking, is they clearly don't know about the coded message. So someone had to have sent it that wasn't on the bridge. Anyway, he gives them a message. Lisa tells the pilots, go ahead and start scrambling your fighters, whatever. And because their ship has been crippled with precision accuracy, they know exactly where to hit and at what points to most effectively cripple the ship and make it impossible to return. Which goes back to my theory too. But so Lisa scrambles the fighters and orders Claudia to set up the self-destruct sequence, but not start it until she gives the order. Well, then they get a message that's being broadcast to the SDF-1, and even Vanessa's like, I don't know where this is coming from. It's in our system. We have no control. It's taken over. It's in our system. And it's Chiron giving his message that, hey, I'm taking over. If I can't have your ship, then no one can have your ship. Surrender or die. And Lisa's like, screw that. We're going to fight. If we're going to die, we're going to die fighting. So, obviously, that means she declines. So, anyway, they start the battle, and it's a pretty epic battle. I'll show you some scenes from the battle. Getting a little bit ahead of myself. I apologize about that. There's a scene, and I love the battle sequences in these comics. They are gorgeous, which is one of the selling points of Robotech. And there's Rick, Max, and Ben all flying off doing their thing. And then Max saving Ben is right here. And Rick's like, oh man, you're so good at this. Like, where have you been? Like, why haven't they done anything with you yet? Like, Just like in the show, he's a very sterling performer. Get it? Because, his name's Sterling. Uh, Hilarious. Anyway, Rick gets his blurry vision again. And he's like, I can't see. I'm blind. It's locked on target, but I can't see where anything is. You guys need help. And they're like, we're too far away to help. And Chiron's like, you had your shot, you didn't take it. You're going to die. But Chiron stopped. And again, this is a very childlike pose from Chiron. Chiron was crazy in the show, but I wouldn't necessarily call him childlike. In this comic, he seems much more childlike, and his appearance plays on that. He's got a much younger appearance than Britai and Exodore do. So far, those are the main Zentradi we've seen. We haven't even really seen a very good close-up of Grell. Chiron looks the youngest out of all of the Zentradi we've seen so far. And he kind of acts a lot more childish in this than he did before. He was just nutso. Like, he was just insane. Here, it's much more of a, you hurt me, I'm gonna hurt you back. Why can't I go hurt them? Why are you recalling me? It seems much more like a child response than it does Chiron actually being insane, which I actually don't mind. I've said this before. I don't mind a lot of the changes that they've made to some of the characters. Like, it just seems like they're kind of updating it, but not in the way that hurts the character. I think Chiron, for what the series is, Chiron being a little bit more childish than crazy actually is more beneficial, because Britai is slightly more crazy than he was in the show. Like, he's much more gruff. He's much more aggressive. He's much more of what you would imagine a bad guy to be than he was in the show. Because even in the show, when he was the main bad guy, it's kind of like, well, I can see him turning. I could see him being like, yeah, these guys are all right. And you're starting to see that in this issue, but at the same time, it's more just respect of the fact that they've defeated a well-decorated Zentradi commander in Chiron. They've defeated numerous times. And I think that because Britai is slightly more crazy and slightly more aggressive, they kind of need to tone down Chiron's aggressiveness, because it could be overpowering. So I like the change, like I had before. And here's Britai's ship recalling Chiron, because as we've seen in the show and in here, the Zentradi, if there's disobedience in the Zentradi ranks during a battle, the Zentradi have the power to recall these disobeying ships and bring them to justice, which, like I said, you can see here. This part, this is not okay. So after the battle, Rick and Minmay catch up, and she's like, hey, great news. You didn't miss anything from my party. After the battle started, everyone kind of went to shelters. There's only so long that you can pretend that you're not in a life and death situation, I know you're in battle. But great news, though. The producers of Macross Has Talent called, and they're like, hey, yeah, you know how we declined your performance earlier? Well, we just saw your video, and we love it. So we're going to retract our declining and you can be on the show if you want to. And Rick gives this cheesy line, and he's like, Minmay, I've come to the realization that you got to live life to the fullest. You never know what's going to happen to you. You know, I almost died today, and you can't live life just pretending. And he's like, I'm sorry I didn't get you a birthday present here. And then he just kisses her without her consent. And as you can see, she's very much, get away from me. I didn't ask for this. And this is not okay. Okay? Like, Rick would have never done this in the show. Rick was much more, he thought he was suave, and RoboSkullcast has gone into this quite a bit. But he thinks he's, better with the ladies than he actually is. He's very much shy guy. He thinks he's confident, but he's kind of timid and wants to be their friend leading to boyfriend. And he would have never actually done this in the show. And here, I can see him doing that. And I can definitely see Rick thinking, this line's great. This is going to be a cute moment. We're going to enjoy this later. It's not okay. It seems cute. It's like, oh yeah, I almost died, and I realized I can't lie to myself. I can't not live life to the fullest. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And here, kiss. But with everything going on in the world today, don't just kiss a girl without their consent, okay? I know there's viral videos about it. I know there's a lot of... Just don't do it. If they want to kiss you, they'll kiss you. But just don't kiss them without them saying okay, or without them leaning in a little bit to connect. Don't go all the way. I think it was Hitch. He's like, hey, it's 60-40. You lean in. If they don't go in, you lean out. You'd never go 100%. And that's this case right here. Just don't do it. Okay? It's really that simple. Don't do it. That's all I'm going to say to this. And then if we get the best part, as you can see here, Chiron is currently being punished. He's got a slit in his back and a pole sticking through the slit, and his hands are chained to the other end of this pole, which has got a T cross section that his hands are tied to. So if he moves his arms at all, it's going to mess up his back quite a bit, because it's, like I said, there's a hole in his back that's leading it. They literally have it on the spine. He can kill himself by moving his arms. And then on top of that, his head's shaved, his beautiful hair, as RoboSkullcast's joke is, his beautiful hair's gone. They've shaved it. You can see he has a bruised eye. He's bloodied up. They've really been punishing him for his disobedience. And Britai's line, I think, was, "You're a wild beast that needs to be broken." Which, whew, that's rough. It's going to be interesting to see how Chiron evolves from this. Like I said, he's very childlike at this point. This could be his breaking point. This is where the switch could just go off. And then Britai's like, so far, the Micronians have impressed me. They have shown more resolve than I thought they would. And where brute force hasn't worked, we're going to try stealth and cunning. So these three gentlemen, which if you watch ROBOTECH, you'll know them as Braun, Rico, and Kanda, in that order from left to right. They are the spies in ROBOTECH. In this case, they're not necessarily spies, they're insurgents. So on top of the mole that's already there, the human mole, they're now going to be going in and trying to take over the SDF-1 from inside out. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic where, like, there's a human mole and now there's Entrati moles in the ship. That's going to be an interesting dynamic. And I'm interested to see, like I said, I've been fine with a lot of the changes with the characters. I'd love to see what they do with the spies, because the spies provided some comedic relief. Some of it is questionable for today's time. It was in the 80s, which some things were a lot more accepted for jokes compared to today. But I'd love to see where they go with it, and whether they keep that comedic effect or whether they're going to keep the very serious tone that we have in the comic series so far. And I would love to see that, to see those changes and see where they go with this. And obviously that's the last page. That's where we leave off with that cliffhanger. I am enjoying this. Like I said about Marco Trini, first couple issues there were some problems, but he's really fine-tuned it, and he's really honed in on his style and the way he wants to go, and he's really done a very good job with the series overall, looking at it now. I didn't mind there were some issues I had with the writing in the first couple issues from Brian Wood, but I think he overall did a good job of setting up that first arc and setting up the whole issue, the whole series as a whole. I think he did a great job of that. And obviously all of this plot was done by him too. Like he created the story, and even though he's no longer writing the dialogue and all that, he still has his hand in it. So no offense to him at all. He's done a very good job. I'm loving the story overall so far. But Simon Furman, man, there's a lot of information in there, and it's not boring to read. It's like I'm reading it and I'm enthralled. Like he's going into technical stuff, but at the same time the technical stuff's not too isn't too boring. He keeps it moving at a good pace. The pacing is fantastic so far. And I'm just really enjoying the dialogue overall in this current arc. And I really hope that if they do move on after this arc is done, if they keep going at the pace they're at, next issue will be the end of that arc, and then we'll start a new arc. If this is his last issue in this arc, I would love to see him do an arc in the Robotech Masters. I'd love to see him do an arc in New Generation. I'd love for them to bring him back into the series for more arcs, if this is in fact his only arc in the Macross saga. That's something that hasn't been announced. We'll see about that. I told my family, and this is a very good description. I love how this comic series right now is one part Star Trek, one part Star Wars, one part Whodunit, one part Hunt for Red October. I'm loving this so far. There's so much going on, but at the same time you're not overwhelmed. Like, we got nothing about the whodunit going into this issue, because we already had that in the last issue. But we got more about what was going on in Mars base. We still have some of that. That arc is still happening, the Mars base arc, even though they're no longer on Mars. And that's fascinating. The whole space-time rift and what they were trying to do on the base with the cloaking and the shadow technology and all that. Fascinating. And then obviously their journey back home to Earth. That's something we already know about. The whodunit and the hunt for Red October, hunt for the mole and all this stuff with Mars base and all of that. That wasn't in the show. And I love that they added that, and I love all of that. But at the same time, I fell in love with the show, and they're keeping that overall arc. It's still, they're journeying home from Earth, and they have to go slowly because their spacefold generator disappeared. So they can't just warp back to Earth. They have to fly slowly to Earth. And, well, slowly. I mean, they've gone from Pluto to Mars in a few months. That's not exactly slow, but, it's not going from Earth to Pluto in minutes, But they have to slowly return to Earth. And they're fighting the Zentradi all along. And there's disagreement among the Zentradi like there was in the show. Chiron constantly disobeyed in the show. And, he got recalled like three times in the show. And other times they had to break their blockade in order to block Chiron's attack. And it's just, that's still there. That whole dynamic's still there. Speaking of that, the person that broke their blockade to stop Chiron was Azonia. Now, this comic, there's an interesting aspect to this. The three spies, we do see the three spies in what would be the next episode, which would be Miss Macross, or in this case, Macross Has Talent. Because we got to keep with the times. But we do see them, but it's not necessarily as spies. They're using their reconnaissance vessel to take the broadcast of Miss Macross and relay it to the Zentradi for a clearer picture. So that's going on. And that's where we first see them. But they don't actually become spies. They don't actually get micronized and sent to the SDF-1 until episode 12. Now, in between, like I said, this takes place in episode 8 in the show, the events of episode 8. So, between episode 8 and episode 12, after the Miss Macross, the radio tower gets destroyed, so I guess that's partly episode 10. And Lisa is sent by Captain Global with Max, Ben, and Rick to scan ahead and help navigate through the rough space that they're in. And then they get captured by the Zentradi. And that's where they learn about the Zentradi culture. That's how the Zentradi learn about them. And that's where the seeds get planted that Earth's culture is like a plague to the Zentradi. It starts messing with their minds. It starts... there's something that they don't like about Earth culture that just puts them into immediate shock. From Rick and Lisa kissing and the music and all that. So, because Globul's dead now, and now the Zentradi spies are getting sent to the ship, are we going to skip that whole arc? Is Lisa... I know Lisa Captain Kirk'd it on Mars and went ahead to Mars base even though she's the captain. And against a lot of protest, might I add. There's no way that she's going to get away with going into a cat's eye reconnaissance to help lead the SDF-1. So what's going to happen there? What's going to happen? Because now, without her, there's not going to be a kiss for the Zentradi that I can think of. Maybe in this instance, Rick does kiss Ben like they were initially wanting. Maybe Rick and Ben do actually kiss in this. Maybe they do get captured and they have to escape. But Lisa's the one that kind of documents all of the information they're learning about the aliens. Ben and Rick kind of do that as well. They're like, okay, well, here's my side of the story. But Lisa went in depth. She had pages upon pages. It was her report that they kept referencing. They referenced Ben's report. They're like, a young man that has yet to prove himself, you know. But without her report, without her kiss with Rick on the Zentradi ship, I wonder how that's going to work out. That's going to be an interesting thing to find out, because this is going to be interesting. Maybe they see it in Macross's talent. Maybe that, I don't know. But it's something to keep an eye on, because it is so different from what they've done in the past. It's fascinating as a already experienced Robotech fan who's watched the series more times than I can count, admittedly, because I'm a total nerd with no life. It'd be fascinating to see how they change. They've already changed tons of events that have happened, but this is a key moment in the show where they kiss and the Zentradi look like they're going to barf. They've never seen that. They are clones. Men and women are separated. They've never seen a man and woman interact, let alone kiss, let alone make contact with each other. And that was the start of the downfall of the Zentradi. That is what ended up being the plague that caused so many Zentradi to defect, and ended up putting them into shock during the final battle, where the SDF-1 does that, and then explodes their own barrier system, destroying the Zentradi in the show. Like, none of that would have happened without the kiss. So what's going to happen now? And how are they going to get information? Most of their information came from that one interaction on the ship. They don't really learn much more about the Zentradi until Exodor comes on board. Exodor is the one that fed them all this information they didn't already know and finished piecing everything together. And that started from that kiss. And with Lisa being captain, is that kiss going to happen? Are they going to be shocked by men and women interacting with each other? Like, it's going to be cool to see how they change that, and if in fact the Zentradi never turn. That'd be something they could do. And as I said with the live action movie, I don't want them to do the same story that the show did, because I've seen the show. I know what happens in the show. It'd be boring for me to watch another medium doing the same thing. And that's why I'm loving this whodunit. I'm loving this, Hunt for Red October type mole situation. Who is it? Who's sabotaging the ship? So it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. And I'm rambling at this point, but thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for hearing me ramble. Again, after this video is uploaded, comment, tell me what you guys think about all the theories. Tell me what you think about the comic series in general and this issue. Man, this issue is jam-packed of information. I'm going on 1 hour and 10 minutes, which is easily the longest stream I've done to this point. So, thank you guys for watching, and enjoy your day.